Welcome, everybody, to the March 27th meeting of the Anacortes Planning Commission. Ms. Gleichman, would you mind taking roll, please?
Commissioner Mills, Commissioner McCombs.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Commissioner Martin.
Present.
Commissioner Stoneman. Commissioner Doretsky.
Here.
Commissioner Courier.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're okay. I know that we've heard from Mr. Mills that he was not going to be able to be here tonight.
I think we also heard from Mr. Stoneman because
Okay.
he still has jury duty.
Okay. All right. So item number 2 is minutes. No minutes at this time. Item number 3 is public comment. Anybody from the public want to speak? Anybody online?
No.
Okay. Number 4 is public hearings. No public hearing tonight. Item number 5 is other business. 2025 Comprehensive Plan Update, review of the draft public participation plan. And it looks like Mr. Coleman is up.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Hopefully you all had a chance to read this rather short document. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the public participation plan is, why we do it, how it's related to the planning department's update of the 2025 comprehensive plan update, and then talk about where to go from here. So as we all know, and I've talked about a couple of times, given a lot of details about our upcoming 2025 comprehensive plan update, just some reminders for those watching at home, and maybe this is their first time tuning into the 2025 comp plan, so I'll be just briefly talk about what it is. It's our 20-year planning period from 2025 to 2045. Updating our comprehensive plan to make sure that we're planning for the amount of growth that is reasonably expected over that 20-year period. That includes, our utility improvements and planning for new population growth and new jobs that are going to happen in the city, and making sure that we have the transportation systems, sewer, water, everything in place to accommodate that future growth, as well as I've talked about quite a bit, making sure that we have enough zoning for the amount of housing that we are expecting. So the 2025 periodic update is a required update, and actually if I go back to this other one, it's required per the Growth Management Act, and there's periodic ones. We do more than just a little bit of updates to our comprehensive plan. Every year we have the opportunity to update our comprehensive plan to a certain amount, well, really as much as we want, with the exception of we can't expand our urban growth areas or do major zoning changes that might affect our urban growth area. But every 10 years per state law, we have to do this major update where we update our critical areas ordinance and our urban growth area, which is based on population projecting. So we only do the population projecting during these periodic cycles. As I mentioned at our last Planning Commission meeting, the update is due by December 31st, 2025. When we first were talking about this, it was due in June of 25. But during the legislative session this year, they gave jurisdictions in this planning year time frame 6 extra months. So now we don't need to have this done until December 31st, 2025. Phew, because we were really crunching it on time. We could have done it, but we're really happy to have this extra 6 months. That'll allow us to do a better public participation, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. In your packet and in the packet that is online is our draft public participation plan. So when you see the letters PPP, that stands for Public Participation Plan. And just note that you can always look at our current comprehensive plan, which is for the planning horizon of 2016 to 2036 on our website. And I'm providing a link here, which isn't very helpful in the Zoom presentation, but when we get the PowerPoint slides up on the website, it should be available for people to click on the link on the PDF and access directly to your website. Or you can just go to our website and Google or do the search function for comprehensive plan. Now we'll move on. In our 2025 periodic update, like I mentioned, we're doing population projections, not unemployment projections, doing employment projections. We will be looking at available housing options for new residents, and we're doing that by median income and brackets of income by by groups of roughly 30% groups. And I have a slide on that here quickly. We're also updating our climate element, and which will include a resiliency sub-element and a greenhouse gas emissions sub-element. We are enlisting a lot of help to do that because that's a new element that we do not have in our comp plan. And we're receiving a $500,000 grant from the Department of Commerce to do this climate element. So we're going to be making sure that we're using that money not only for the technical studies and the consultants to write the new element, but also using a lot of that for public outreach. And again, the public outreach is what we're here to talk about tonight. So I'll have more on that. As I also mentioned in the 2025 periodic review, we're updating our urban growth area boundaries potentially if necessary, and our critical areas ordinance. Just as a reminder for the Planning Commission and for those who maybe haven't seen this yet, over this 20-year planning horizon, we're expecting about 5,000 new residents and about 3,150 new jobs that we will want to accommodate to make sure that we're prepared for that and we don't get overwhelmed by unexpected growth. So we plan for the growth and then we don't suffer the ills of growth. As mentioned, here are those housing income bands that we're needing to also make sure that we have proper zoning to accommodate. So again, 0 to 30 area median, for people in the 0 to 30 area median income bracket, we're anticipating a needed new 924 units. The 31 to 50% of area median income, about 592 new units. 51 to 80%, and about 422, 81 to 100%, 226 units. And so hopefully you can see this and I don't have to keep reading it. Now, when you look at that and you say, well, there's a lot more units that are below the 100% AMI than there are above the 100% AMI. This was a question that I think Commissioner Martin asked last time is, well, if it's area median income, shouldn't it be right down the middle? Like 50% need to be above, that area median income is the middle of the income. So there should be 50% of the residents above that and 50% below that. Well, that might actually be true, and that's truly what the definition of mean or median means. This is taking into account the already lack of housing. So the state modeling took into account how many in each income bracket is necessary now and how many will be in the future, and kind of smash those together and say, in order to get to parity to accommodate all of these income bands in 2045, we have a deficit on those lower, below 100% AMI, and that's why there's so much more in the below 100 AMI brackets than there are in the above 100 AMI. So hopefully that answers your question in a understandable way. I hope I'm explaining that well. And I just like this slide a lot. I've showed it to you, and I like to keep showing it because I think it's really illustrative of what the city's accomplished already through our comprehensive plan. And for those who haven't heard, I'll repeat myself again. In 2016, the city updated the comprehensive plan to allow for more infill development and making it easier to do cottage development, which are smaller units on a lot, so you can get more units on a lot than just single family lots. Making it easier for more duplexes in the city, triplexes and fourplexes and townhomes. And so those were very conscious policy decisions to make those types of what are referred to as middle housing, making those easier to build in the city. And then in 2019, we actually finally made our way through updating the development regulations to enact the comprehensive plan policies. And so in 2019, when our new rules went into place, you could see that 72% of the new housing built in that year was single family, and 25% was accessory dwelling units. After those rules went into place, you can see the shape of that pie chart changing, where we're seeing a lot more cottage development now, and we're seeing more, maybe not a whole lot more duplex units, slightly bigger, but more townhome units for sure, and more multifamily units. So what I understand this is, since we changed our development regulations and policies to allow middle housing and make it easier to do multifamily and cottage housing, the development industry was eager to do so, and we saw a pretty quick change from where the development industry was focusing on single family to developing all sorts of different housing throughout the city, which means there's pretty strong indication there that our zoning codes were holding back the type of development that the development community wanted to do, and the type of housing that are more affordable. And so that was the driver behind allowing these middle housing types, duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, and cottage housing, was to allow and encourage more affordable type housing, because single family houses cost a lot more to build per unit than it does for these other types of middle housing. And this is showing how those policy changes have borne fruit and actually allowed the development community to create more affordable housing. We are still in the process of studying our available land, having our land capacity analysis done. And when we get that information, we'll be bringing it to you. But what that study is looking at how much land is developable in the city or partially developable. And under our current zoning designations, how much new housing can be built on those lands that are zoned residential, and how much more commercial and industrial development can be had on the properties that are zoned for those types of uses. So we'll be getting that analysis hopefully by, I don't know yet, maybe May. Hopefully we can report back to you in April, but we're dependent on our consultant on that. So we'll see when we get that. And then once we get that information, we'll be able to start drafting answering some of these questions, or how will we anticipate how will we accommodate this anticipated growth based on the findings of our land capacity analysis, and knowing how many housing units we need to accommodate, and knowing how many new jobs we need to accommodate. Then we start doing the hard work of, okay, how are we going to fit that into our existing city limits by increasing zoning densities? Or do we expand our urban growth area? These are all policy decisions that the Planning Commission will make recommendations on based on public input, and then the City Council ultimately making their decisions. Now, that was all kind of recap, so I apologize for, going over that again. It took a little longer than I had hoped it had, but now we're going to get into the actual public participation plan itself, and that's the document that came in your in the packet that's online today. So what is the public participation plan? In the introduction of this document, it talks about why we're doing this, and so that's what I've gone over for the past 15 minutes or so. So we're required to have a public participation program to encourage, to engage with the residents, stakeholders, tribes, state agencies early and often. So this document is identifying how we plan to do so, and we have some schedules also saying that we'll go over that explain what time periods we reasonably expect we'll be working on which parts of the comprehensive plan, and we'll get into that as we move through this document. So it's just identifies how the city will provide that early and continuous public participation as we develop updates to our comprehensive plan. Roles and responsibilities is outlined in here. So the city of Anacortes, obviously, we're doing the heft of all of this work, updating it in compliance with the Growth Management Act and the relevant state changes to that over the past couple of years, which are fairly significant. I think I've mentioned in the past, we used to just have to look at how many people we're going to grow by and make sure that we have enough zoning for that. We're doing a much more sophisticated look now because we have to do it by housing income band. We have to, as we'll describe here a little bit, is we have to make sure that there's equitable outreach and making sure that there's not racially disparate impacts identified in our comprehensive plan. So, and that harkens back to the days of redlining, where communities didn't allow like specific people of color, mostly in certain neighborhoods, making sure that none of those policies are in our comp plan. Now, we don't have anything quite as blatant as that, but as we look through, there might be things in there. We haven't done this part yet, but a lot of cities, jurisdictions may have things in there that they didn't anticipate or intend to have racially disparate impacts or impacts on distressed neighborhoods. We're going to go through and make sure that that none of those impacts are in our comprehensive plan. We've hired the consultant Makers Architecture and Urban Design to help with this update process. So they'll be writing our climate element. They'll be writing updates to our housing element and our land use element, and helping with updates to the other parts of the plan also. So they're a big player in this, and they'll be helping out with some of the open houses for the climate element too. Obviously, the Planning Commission, you're here as the sounding board. You'll be holding public hearings for sure, public meetings like this, and we haven't quite developed how we're going to do our workshops and open houses, but traditionally we do that at the Planning Commission. Cities will do that at the Planning Commission. However, as we're making sure that we're having equitable outreach, not everybody can make it to a 7 o'clock or a 6 o'clock meeting on Wednesday nights. Some people have kids, some people have jobs that work late, some people have to travel for work and can't be here in time. Some people don't have access to computers, some people don't know that the Planning Commission exists. So we're going to be doing a lot this go around to make sure that we're reaching out to those people that don't have access to the Planning Commission. And then, of course, the City Council is going to be making the final decisions and everything besides the urban growth area. So I think I described it at previous meetings. If the city does determine that our course of action to accommodate future growth is to expand our urban growth area, we don't actually make that decision. We do all the math, we do all the legwork and show why it's necessary and how it'll work and how we as a city will be able to accommodate future growth into that area. So that means like identifying whether or not, or what we would need to do if we were to have to, you know, when we would have to extend the sewer and water out into that area, and kind of loose parameters of like, will we be able to do that? We don't need to have detailed studies and exact plans for, you know, what size the sewer pipes are going to be and where the pump stations might need to be. But we need to show that we've thought about what it would take for us to accommodate growth outside of our urban growth area. So we provide all of that to Skagit County, and through Skagit County and the Skagit Council of Governments, Skagit Council of Governments makes a recommendation first to the Board of County Commissioners, and then the Board of County Commissioners through their Planning Commission holds public hearings on all of the jurisdictions requested urban growth area expansions, and then ultimately the Board of County Commissioners makes the decision about whether or not an urban growth area should be expanded as requested. Why Skagit County makes that decision is because the urban growth area boundary is beyond our jurisdiction. If you think about the map that we have, our urban growth area, I don't know if you can see my cursor real well, but way down here on the southeast end of town is our urban growth area. And so the urban growth area is an area outside of the city into which we plan to grow. So it's not part of the city, but it is the area that we anticipate to accommodate future growth. As such, the county treats it a little differently. They don't just issue permits the way they normally would in the urban growth area. They actually work with the city to make sure that development there is either held back until such time that they annex into the city. And annexations are driven by property owners. So the property owner needs to ask to come into the city. So either they would hold back development or make sure that they develop to city standards. Whereas, because the county does not have the same standards for development as we do. You know, we have curb, gutter, sidewalks, street lights, sewer, stormwater requirements. The county, when they don't have sewer, they don't provide water. When roads are built, they don't put sidewalks or stormwater systems. They put a swale along the road and call it good. So we don't want that type of development to happen in our urban growth area, because what that does is impedes future growth, or it puts it upon the city to then have to at some time go back and improve those areas to city standards at great cost to the city, when it's just what should happen is at the time of development, those new developers should build to city standards and hopefully preferably come into the city. That's usually the way it works. So that's a little urban growth area 101, and also explains how the Skagit County Board of Commissioners is involved in our comprehensive plan. Now, there's also all sorts of requirements that our transportation plan needs to meet regional requirements, and that also goes through the Skagit Council of Governments, SCOG. But that's more of their SCOG staff looks at that. How SCOG is involved in the urban growth area expansion process is the Skagit Council of Governments GMA Steering Committee, which is the mayor from each of the participating cities, towns, and the 3 county commissioners are the SCOG Steering Committee. And they make decisions, they make recommendations on urban growth area expansions and changes to the countywide planning policies. And those have to go then to the Board of Commissioners for them to ratify. And of course, the Skagit County Planning Commission is also a step in between there to make sure that it gets even further review. Now, why is there this quasi-board, the Skagit Council of Governments, GMA Steering Committee exist to do this, is because in the past, the cities and the counties didn't always get along and didn't always have the same interests. They may have had competing interests. The Skagit Council of Governments GMA Steering Committee, from a city perspective, is a very good thing, because now all of the cities have a lot more say in how the county actually assigns urban growth areas and countywide planning policies that affect the cities. So it's great that the county agreed to let the cities come to the table and have input on how their own growth happens, because that's not required in state law. That's something that that all of the jurisdictions in the city, in the county, agreed on. And so it does add an extra layer, but it's also adds, that's one way of looking at it, is, it's more work. But on the other hand, it also offers more opportunity for review for the public, and it gives cities a stronger say in their own future growth. And because, like I said, the Skagit Board of County Commissioners actually defines what the urban growth area boundaries are. Any questions? I just rattled off a lot.
How does the city account for people that live locally on the county, that are effectively, they live outside of the city limits, but they're still using city services, and it's also residences of, well, I guess not city residents, but they're effectively, for all practical purposes, they're city residents, right?
So for example, when in Anacortes we say, we live on the island, and so we kind of think of everybody on Fidalgo as part of the city, but they're not part of the city. They're not in the jurisdiction. They don't vote in city elections, and they don't receive city sewer, but yet they travel to the city, and they look at, and they shop here, and they have impacts on the city. So that's how, our transportation plan is, the biggest impact is the transportation. So that's one of the reasons that our transportation plan is looked at regionally by SCOG staff. And we do like actual traffic counts and modeling and so we understand how much traffic we're having. Under our county GMA arrangement, we assume we're trying to create policies that put 20% of new development in the county. Not really put it there, but we're assuming that 20% of new growth is going to happen in the county, and then 80% happens in the cities and their urban growth areas. So that's the model that we look at. There is probably a disconnect of the impact of people from outside of city limits that come here, but we understand what that traffic modeling is. We know what the population of what the area is going to be. We have something called TAZs, T-A-Zs, transportation. It's like transportation area zones? It's kind of a silly name, but there's all these little sections that we use in the modeling for our transportation plan that studies all of the TAZs in the area. And hopefully, when we get to the transportation element, which will of course come to the Planning Commission for review and then public comment, hopefully we can describe that more to fill in the details of how we accommodate for people that are traveling into the city. But that's the major impact, because they don't have sewer. The water system models all growth. They are also monitoring what the growth projections are, not just for the city, but for the areas that they serve. So the water plan is very complex, and in theory is taking into account rural growth as well. I'm not thinking of any other significant impacts besides on our commercial users or commercial businesses.
I guess one of the things I wonder about is you have, it's part of the local housing market is going to be county versus city, right? So as you're looking at median income and the number of units, that you're looking at everything within the city limits. Is there any consideration for what's going on in the local area that's county outside of the city limits? As far
So the projections that we received were based out of, I think I described this at, I think it was at the last Planning Commission meeting in March. It starts with countywide projections, and then it's divvied up amongst the jurisdictions. Like I said, 20% goes to the county. So they're doing this same process with their population projections. So it's not just the cities doing it, the county is also looking at their population projections and how they're going to accommodate housing.
Mr. Coleman, I have a quick question. Would you mind going back to the zoning map? And the question is, the Sharps Corner property that the city owns, is it in the city or is it in the urban growth area?
That's in the city.
Okay, thanks.
Well, can we go back to that map one more time? Actually, I have two questions.
Could you speak into the mic?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I'm assuming that the city line at the southeast corner section of the town is Haddon Road. Trust me, let's call it Haddon Road. There's a boundary there.
Yeah.
And for example, if it seems to me like Connor and Anacortes are more limited than some of the other communities in the county as far as what's allowable or what can be developed inside the city limits. So if the city were to decide that would be a natural place to go with residential, sewer, water already out there, walk me through the process. The county actually has to approve giving up that property as far as county property.
They would, not giving up so much as designating it as urban growth area. So that means, changes the type of, the way they allow development out there, because they would be protecting it for future urban development instead of, like 10-acre lots.
So that would, if it was absorbed into the city, then that would go away, or they would make us hold on to the requirement of 10-acre.
So once it's designated as urban growth area, the property owners within an urban growth area have the option to annex into the city. You can't annex into the city unless you're in the urban growth area. Thank you for bringing this up, because I actually left out a really important piece of information there. So we cannot offer urban services outside of our urban growth area. And to the properties in our urban growth area, we really want them to annex in before, not that annexing property is like a big financial win for a city. In fact, it's often not very financially beneficial. And so that's something that we'll study to make sure that the areas that we put in our urban growth area aren't going to break the bank for the city if we try to serve it with services. So, but we want them to annex in. That way we have the ability to manage their roads that are built, make sure that they're built to city standards, making sure that we provide them with sewer, because we don't want development happening around the city that's on septic. Not that septic's bad, but if it's going to possibly come into the city, we don't want it on septic. We want that to be served with sewer. So in order to facilitate development in that area, there's a big incentive for the property owner to annex in before they develop, because the limitations on that property is a lot more significant until they annex in, and then they can, typically develop to higher density standards. And so that's the incentive.
So again, I want to understand the process. So the city decides that would be a natural place for growth. They come to that conclusion. They go to the county, or do they go to the property owners that are in the county and go, do you want to be annexed? And if they say, some of them say no, are they absorbed into that annexation, or does the system kind of leapfrog around the people who want to have access to the services?
So during this 2025 comprehensive plan update process, we will be going through the process of determining where our urban growth area boundary should be. If the planning commission and people that are commenting think that it should be in that area north or south of Haddon Road, going up towards Whistle Lake, if they feel that that's a natural place for growth, we'll propose that. We'll go through this process. Those property owners will be notified and involved, and to see if they want to come into the urban growth area. And I mean, past practice in other jurisdictions has been you work with those property owners to get the ones that want to come into the urban growth area into the city. But of course, sometimes there's, logical areas that could be part of the urban growth area and that thus potentially part of the city in the future. And maybe those property owners don't want to come in. There might be a few that end up in the urban growth area that didn't want to be. Our goal would always be 100% everybody willing, but that's not how governance always works, unfortunately. Now, I don't know if we're going in that area. Nobody's been talking about that, but we're using this just for to illustration purposes. So, but that could be on the table to expand urban growth into area to there.
I'm not particularly picking on that area other than asking how would that work
Yeah.
if that was the area the
So
city
once-
decided we'd like to approach.
Once you're in the urban growth area, then it's incumbent upon you to annex into the area. So it also makes, doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to include properties that aren't going to come into the urban growth area. I mean, property owners change and new property owners may want to, but there's a lot of nuances here, right? I'm kind of all over the place trying to explain the nuances, but the fact that the process itself is we work with property owners to designate an area as urban growth area. We determine what zoning designations would be in that area when they do annex in, and that's how we determine how much new growth could potentially go into that area, which is ultimately what we're needing to do is determine how much new growth can be accommodated in areas outside of the city limits. But then there's a two-step process. They don't annex in until somebody in that area starts a request for annexation. The typical way that annexation is done is the property owners submit a petition to the city requesting to be annexed. And in a geographic area, the city council then mulls over whether or not they're interested in pursuing the annexation, and if so, then they have to submit a full-on petition showing the boundaries of the area that's proposed for annexation. The petition needs to have the signatures of the owners of 60% of the ownership area in that defined boundary area. So that leaves, say, one property owner in the middle of an area doesn't want to come in. Of course, it makes sense for that property owner to come in, so they may be pulled into an annexation unwillingly. But up to 40% of the property owners don't have to, 40% of the ownership, the value of the area, could be annexed without their signature on a petition if the city was willing to do so. We always shoot for higher. And I don't know when the last time Anacortes did an annexation. It's been since the 90s, I think. So, it's just something that we don't have a lot of experience here. So I don't know what that process would play out here. But I've experienced it quite a bit in other jurisdictions.
One more question. Can you go back to the chart that shows the growth, the projected growth, annual growth, or by that one right there?
So, by income band, yeah.
Yeah, we need 3,000 units in order to meet these projections. Off the top of your head, do you have a number what's kind of projected for the MJB property? I mean, if that were to be fully developed per preliminary drawings, I mean, is that 1,000 condos
I
and
do
apartments?
not, but I think our land capacity analysis will identify that, and we're hoping to have that for the Planning Commission to look at next month or the month after.
The reason for the question was I just wondered what percentage would be close in and is possibly on the drawing boards already of that 3,000 that's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, that's exactly what our land capacity analysis is identifying. Our consultants are working on right now, is to see how close we are to being able to meet this 2,942 units within our current city limits. We may not have to, we may not have to expand our urban growth area to accommodate residential growth. It's very well possible based on, the densities that we allow in our commercial and central business districts and the marine mixed use areas. We may find that it's possible within our current zoning designations. So all this UGA discussion could be moot, but I was just going through who the players are in the 2025 comp plan update.
Ask you one more question about, so you talk about area median income. Is there a way to translate that into a cost for what's a price range for a 0 to 30% AMI home versus a
Yes and
1 to
no.
100%?
There's no direct correlation between, what a housing unit in the 0 to 30 is and what a housing unit in the 31 to 50 is. But the Department of Commerce does have guidance on all of the housing, and they do have some, I don't have it memorized. What I know is anything in the 0 to 50% AMI is going to be some sort of supported housing. So it's probably going to be multifamily, larger multifamily. There's a few opportunities for, like the Anacortes Family Center, for example. People donate single family homes, and so there's a smattering of single family homes that'll fall into here that are supported housing. But largely it's going to be new multifamily developments by somebody like the Housing Authority or Anacortes Family Center, who's subsidizing the cost for the people that live there. The 51 to 80% is going to be largely multifamily. And actually, one little side note about the Housing Authority allows up to 60%. So if you're only making 59 or 60% of AMI, you actually qualify for Anacortes Housing Authority housing. They will support you less than somebody who's making 30% of AMI. There's a sliding scale. So, even some of that 51 to 80 could actually fall into supported housing. But generally, 51 to 80 is going to be larger scale multifamily that is not supported. 81 to 100 also is going to fill that gap. And I think like duplex, triplex, other smaller middle housing could also fall in the 81 to 100. I'm flying without a parachute here, though, because I don't have that guidance in front of me. What I do know is that the 120 AMI, well, let me rephrase that. Single-family houses only fit in the 120 and above AMI. They do not, a new single-family house cannot be counted as anything below 120 AMI. And do the math backwards. If it costs $450,000 to buy a piece of land and build a house, now you're carrying a $450,000 mortgage. What's your monthly payment on that? I'm looking at Luke. I don't know.
It's dramatically higher than it was a year and a half ago. Anacortes has a couple of very interesting factors just to consider, and only because that's what I do for a living. But Anacortes housing is more expensive than housing anywhere else in the county, dramatically more expensive. But believe it or not, income levels in Anacortes aren't the highest in the county, simply because a lot of wealthy people come here who don't have a lot of income. They have a lot of assets, and that's you can see that in the number of banks, the number of Edward D. Jones offices in town. I think our town has 8 Edward D. Jones offices, which means there's a lot of investments here. That doesn't necessarily mean those people have a lot of income, simply because they own those $2 million homes free and clear. and so they don't need a lot of income. They obviously would rather keep it in the stock market and not pay our uncle any taxes. So again, there's some interesting factors here regarding what income levels are versus what the price of housing are. Completely different than they are in, let's say, Cedar Woolley or Burlington or Mount Vernon, where the income drives what people can afford. Here it's what they have, how much they want to part with the money they have invested. So again, just interesting dynamics in our town. But
Yeah, and that's exactly why the Planning Commission is involved in this process. You have local knowledge like that. Like, how is Anacortes unique? Well, you know, we have a lot of people that probably are very wealthy, but, you know, they come across at the 100, you know, roughly the 81 to 100% AMI, because that's what, you know, they withdraw that year in their IRA required distributions, for
Correct.
example. But they have a lot more money and can afford a $2 million house.
right.
So yeah, that does skew things. The extent to which, who knows? I saw a statistic today that, you know, we're 40% of our, is it 40% of our population is over 60?
I think it's higher than that.
Something to that effect. Again, flying without a parachute here. So that's going to be unique to Anacortes. All sorts of local factors, and that's exactly why we have the Planning Commission to filter this, to make sure that the policies and the regulations that we ultimately suggest are filtered through people that know the actual lay of the land and the geography of the land too.
Opportunity to push back on the numbers based on input from the planning commissioner? Is that kind of, this is what we've
No, that number's locked. That was recommended by the Skagit Council of Governments Steering Committee, and is going to be part of the countywide planning policy. So those are the numbers that we're working with. Yeah, so we don't really have the opportunity to push back on those. Sorry. All right. So that brings us to the next, the goals of the public participation plan. And this is a living document. These are what our consultants put together, and what we put together based on our knowledge of what the laws are. You know, so our first and foremost, we need to meet the law, and then we can tailor it to our community. So these public participation goals we can add to if there's other things that the Planning Commission feels like is important to add. This document, you know, unless we change it in ways that don't meet the law, we can do this however we want. We did our best to present something to the Planning Commission and the community that will suit your needs. So for those that are at home and their laptops are too small to read this, I guess I'll go through the effort of actually reading this out loud. The current goals that we've built into this are to build awareness about the comprehensive plan, the development regulations, the process under which they're developed, adopted, and amended, and how the public can participate in that process. That's really the crux of it, is like, how is the name of the document kind of gives that away, is public participation. The goal to spur productive community conversation about Anacortes' long-term challenges and opportunities. Commissioner Jaretsky already brought up one of those unique things. Commissioner McCombs also, like, you know, you're bringing up specific issues to the community. This is the forum to have that discussion. This is the forum for the community to bring this into the discussion. And we hope to engage the community on these issues. Another goal to elevate the voices of communities most affected by past and current discriminatory land use and housing practices, who are vulnerable to potential impacts of the plan's outcomes, and or who are historically underrepresented in planning processes. This could include, but not limited to, youth, people of color, renters, and low-income individuals. I think I stated this as one of our goals earlier, and how I was saying that the underrepresented people, who want to make sure that we're reaching them as, you know, these are some of the people identified here that can't make it to a planning commission meeting. You know, if you're a kid, you probably have soccer practice or lacrosse practice or whatever, whatever the sport of the day is, and sport of the season is, and are unable to actually be here. And then, of course, if you're working or just don't have internet access, you know, it's hard to participate. So we want to go out and make sure that we're finding ways for those people to also participate in the process. We have a goal to focus resources on soliciting input on elements of the update process likely to be of greatest interest and impact to the community. So that's saying, you know, this housing element is clearly a big one. The climate element is clearly a big one. Transportation is always of interest to people. And then, of course, land use too, because that's our zoning policies. And that really is, you know, based on our zoning and our land use policies, that really can form how communities look in the future, or lack of that planning can form bad development in the future. So we want to avoid that and have a community that's livable and enjoyable by everybody. We also wrote a goal to offer engagement opportunities that are relevant to all audiences. Not everybody goes to planning commission meetings, so it's not relevant to them, but maybe social media is more their style. Or some people might not like the formality of going to a planning commission and might be more interested in a workshop or something like that. And then finally, a goal to share data and community stories to increase the shared understanding of issues. So we're just trying to get the word out. I've already given 2 presentations out in the public. I have another one scheduled in in May to another civic group. So I'm going out and speaking to the public, getting the word out about what we're doing here and telling people to participate. And I'm getting a lot of positive feedback. People are asking, oh, so the Planning Commission is going to be doing that when? Here's when. We'll get that in a minute. So we've built that into here. So who are the audience and partners? Frankly, it's everybody. It's everybody who lives in town, wants to live in town, used to live in town, is still interested, owns land in town, owns a business in town, lives on Guaymas and passes through town. Whoever wants to participate, but we definitely want to make sure that we're getting the information out to tribal governments, including Samish, Swinomish, Soxwéatl, and Upper Skagit. Members of the public, that's what I was describing, that's basically everybody. Also, non-government organizations, NGOs. I'm missing a dot there. So some of the non-government organizations that we've identified in the document are service clubs, Chamber of Commerce, local environmental groups, the Downtown Anacortes Alliance, religious institutions, Skagit Habitat for Humanity, Skagit Land Trust, Anacortes Community Health Council, Anacortes Teachers and Education Staff Union, Boys and Girls Club of Skagit County, Anacortes Family Center. Insert numerous others here, and we're happy to include them in this document. It's a little odd I feel like we're leaving out so many and identifying a few. So we're happy to add everybody that we can think of. The important thing is that we're thinking who should be involved and letting people know that they can participate and what the participation process looks like. Obviously, elected and appointed officials, Anacortes city departments and service providers. That includes, our public works departments, human resources, parks and recs, museum, fiber, police, fire and emergency, and medical services. And they're already tired of me telling them, hey, you should be participating in the comp plan. Hey, you need to update your section of the capital facility plan. And or the capital facility element, and, oh, hey, have you updated your impact fees for fire recently? Are you interested in doing so? And they're like, yeah, I gotta go put out a fire, leave me alone. But no, they're actually, all of the departments are cooperating and really happy to be involved in the process. But they are busy, and sometimes you got to remind people that they need to be involved. The other service providers, like the electric companies, gas, cable, telecommunications, they're always interested in future growth because they need to provide the utilities for future growth. Other cities and towns, obviously they're all going through this also, so they're pretty well aware, but there are partners in this process. And state agencies, they're often overlooking, their Department of Commerce oversees our comp plan update. We have to send our updates to them for their review to make sure that they're consistent with state law and other federal laws. They also make sure that it's consistent with the other jurisdictions in the county, basically the county, to make sure that all of our policies are in conformance with each other. And of course, just like with any SEPA review, Department of Ecology is involved. OFM, Office of Financial Management, is the agency that provided us our population projections for the county. And there are demographers, they're the ones that continue to monitor how many housing units we're building each year so that they come up with our population estimates each year. And Department of Transportation, yeah, they actually do look at our transportation plan and make sure that it's compliant. And then the federal government, obviously, Naval Air Station has a pretty large impact on Anacortes. And then Coast Guard, Army Corps of Engineers, FAA, we have an airport, and National Park Service are the ones listed. We could always add more. So, how do we plan to get the word out? What's kind of cool about this is there's actually a lot of bullets here. Like, we've got a plan to use all of these tools to let people know about what's going on, including direct mailing. We've created a contact email address for people that have questions about the comp plan. And so that's compplan@cityofanacortes.org. That way it goes, we direct people to that. That way any comments and questions coming about the comp plan are going to the right inbox, making sure that it's getting to the right people so their comments are actually counted. So that is the best way for people to participate if they have comments or questions, is to use this compplan@cityofanacortes.org email address. I know it's tempting to send it to the mayor because you think if it goes to the mayor, he's going to take care of business. But this is by far the best way. Otherwise, the mayor just has to forward it, for example, or sending it to all of your city council members. It's good for them to be involved, but this is the best way for it to actually make it into the record. The web page, obviously, that's the easy one. Subscription email list. The Anacortes American has been doing a good job of covering what's going on at City Council and at the city, and we intend to use them to also be a part of this process. Social media, we're still working on that one. We have a PCED page, but a Facebook page, I think, and we need to kind of get that rolling a little better. A-Town is our town. A-Town is our town, the quarterly newsletter. We intend to get information out through that. Public meetings and workshops such as these and additional special meetings potentially. Student teacher outreach. That one is one of the newer tools in our toolbox. And that is described. To help the city get more youth engagement and input of and input on the comprehensive plan, city staff can conduct outreach to local schools. The intent of the outreach is to augment civic education with introduction to students about planning and community concerns with the intent of acquiring youth perspective on local issues. Oh, some of this got a little goofed up here. We will be having a climate policy, I apologize, but all of the tools are actually listed in the document itself, even though I've duplicated a couple here. Climate Policy Advisory Team, the CPAT, is it's recommended by the Department of Commerce Climate Element Guidance. The city will form a climate policy advisory team to aid in the development of the Anacortes Comprehensive Plan Climate Element. There'll be more focused work groups to review like goals and policies, potential goals and policies before they, that'll go into the drafts that come to the Planning Commission for review. Pop-up tabling at specific locations, community and civic groups, like I mentioned, targeted stakeholder interviews, surveys may be used to solicit input from a broad range of community members, including those who may be unlikely to attend in-person or virtual meetings. Surveys could be used to receive specific feedback on elements of the comprehensive plan update or to help better understand the community's point of view on certain topics. Surveys could be web-based, in-person, or paper-based. And so that's the primary tools that we're intending. If anybody's got any other great ideas that you think we could actually pull off, or maybe not, we're all ears. Like I said, this is a first draft. We're getting the word out. Like, we want people to be involved, and this is how we intend to do it. Now, the question is always, when are we doing this? Which is at least the question I ask. In the document itself, we've got some rough timelines, and I think I'll let Libby take over here because she also has a more interactive timeline that talks about what we'll be doing.
Thanks, John, and good evening, everyone. Nice to be here tonight. So yes, I am going to talk a little bit about the project schedule. We have sort of a simplified project schedule that emphasizes public engagement opportunities at the end of the public participation plan, and that is what you see here on this slide. And then we also have a more detailed visual schedule that is not in the public participation plan, but we will be putting that up on the website shortly. So kind of just skimming through the time frame, we are right now in the sort of the initial project startup stage of this overall update process. We're working on the public participation plan, as you know. Just today, I published the comp plan, 2025 comp plan update webpage. So that is now up and running, and people can go to that to find out about documents that are, we don't have any documents available yet except the public participation plan, but in the future we will put documents that are available for public comment there. And then also other project related documents and information and updates will be out on that website. And then, during this period of time, early spring, John mentioned that he's been going out and giving presentations to service clubs and different community clubs just to get the word out. Part of the next few months is going to be really focused on additional public outreach and information gathering. Behind the scenes, our consultants are working on right now, as John mentioned, the land capacity analysis, looking at our existing comprehensive plan and what new state laws are in place, what new requirements we may have, and doing a gap analysis to identify, to give us a kind of a start on what changes do we need to make to the plan. So then also, we will be looking at having an open house workshop just to kind of introduce the overall process. We don't have a date for that yet, but right now we're targeting the May through July timeframe. We will put out lots of public notice before we actually have a scheduled date for that. From spring through the end of the year is really, as I mentioned, going to be focused on doing kind of the background data work, getting information, gap analysis, public outreach, getting information from members of the public about what they think is important in updating this plan, bringing information to the Planning Commission, and having those workshops and meetings. So we plan generally to have the initial draft of the complete comprehensive plan document in early 2025. So January, we're targeting to kind of have that put out for public review. We'll have some workshops, Planning Commission meetings to go through that. And from there, the Planning Commission will have public hearings and provide a recommendation to City Council. We're targeting around spring to summer of 2025, with City Council taking up the issue and potential adoption summer to fall 2025. So giving ourselves a little cushion there before the end of the year, which is when the deadline is. So this plan, this time frame, this schedule will absolutely change. This is just our first draft stab at what looks realistic, working backwards from our deadline, and what's realistic in terms of what our consultants are telling us for getting the information to us. So, but we will keep this document updated on the website and available for folks to take a look at. And as I mentioned, this is pretty much the same thing. I don't think I'll go through all of these items, but this will also be available for review. I think this is you, John. Or am I talking about next steps? Are there any questions about that schedule?
Thank you, Libby, and I appreciate that you said this absolutely will change. We'll do our best to keep it on that time frame, but you just never know what's going to happen. So what's next, and what's already happened? So we've already accepted the $125,000 grant for most of our comp plan update process and executed the contract with makers to do much of that work. We're at the final stages of completing and executing a $500,000 grant also from the Department of Commerce for the climate element, and working on a contract with makers to do that. And they have a sub-consultant with them that's focusing on doing like the hardcore technical climate work, the vehicle miles traveled. No, they're not. Are they doing VMT? And they're doing VMT is vehicle miles traveled, and and our greenhouse gas emissions. So those are more technical things. So those are being subcontracted out to parametrics. And we've met with them. They know what they're talking about, so that's good. We'll be talking more about the climate element itself in the future. Like Libby had said, we're going to have some kickoff meetings where makers and parametrics are going to come in and really describe the process. We insisted that they come and work with the community because they can describe it much better than we can. And then we're going to bring the public participation plan back again for a public hearing on April 24th. And at which point we'll be hoping for a recommendation from the Planning Commission for the council to approve it. So our plan is April 24th would be our next meeting, unless something comes up in the next few days where we need to get a Planning Commission meeting together for the first half of April. But right now it looks like we're skipping that April 10th meeting. If that is the date. Make sure I have that date right. Yeah. So no April 10th meeting planned at the moment, and April 24th, come ready. It's going to be a bigger agenda. We'll have some other items besides some project items, in addition to the public participation plan, public comment period. So we need to get that published, so people are aware that there's going to be a public hearing. So that is that's it. That's all we had. Any questions on any of that?
Mr. McCombs?
And Mr. Coleman, I guess I have two questions. One, you mentioned, I think there's a health council. There was outreach to the health council. Does that include like the medical community and Island Hospital and looking at kind of medical infrastructure?
I don't know much about. It's just one of the organizations that was included. I don't know much about what each of those necessarily do.
Okay, is part of the outreach plan to reach out to the medical community and get, I guess, their input on city growth and what's required?
It's more letting people know that this process is happening and explaining to it what the goals are of it and how they can participate, and less like reaching out and saying, here, what's your opinion on this, that, and the other. There's a lot of people to reach out to, and we want to make sure that they're participating and not just being asked specific questions, because then it feels like they're only being asked to participate partially.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the other question is you have pop-up tabling. I'm not familiar with what pop-up tabling is, so I was just curious.
We pop up a table in front of a store or a community center or something and put up a little trifold and have some pictures on it. People come over and say, hey, what's this about? And then we hit them with the, hey, have you heard of our comp plan update?
So speaking of that, can we have publicly, what is the website?
Actually have it up on the screen if you minimize the presentation. There you go.
So it appears to be www.anacorteswa.gov /1650/2005 comprehensive plan update.
Okay, so if somebody wanted to find that, they could go to the city website and do a search for comprehensive plan and probably find it that way.
I tested out Google, and I just Googled 2025 comp plan update Anacortes, and it was the first result.
Okay, good.
Should be pretty easy to find.
and it's brand new, so it doesn't have many hits, so it looks like it might be falling towards the bottom.
Searching from Google worked better.
I'm just thinking, what would a city person do? If it were me, I would go to the city website and I would search comprehensive plan.
Yeah. We'll work on this. For some reason it won't accept my search, so we'll have to work on this.
Okay, that'd be great.
Or possibly because we're in Bing, I don't know. Try another search engine.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Do you want to give us any kind of updates from the city council, anything like that?
So our agenda keeps fighting back against our section on here that is Planning Commission update, which is something that I keep trying to get on there, and it just keeps kicking it off. And or Planning Department update. So Monday night, I think one of the more exciting things that happened was the joint City Council Port Commission meeting here at 5 o'clock, where they discussed the event center joint project. On Monday night, they approved an interlocal agreement to have an architecture firm to do a rendering of a potential. It's like a 15% design of a potential site. So it'll have a site plan, and it'll have a couple of floor layouts for the city and the port to look at, and then a rough order of magnitude cost. So over the next 10 weeks, the architect firm will be putting together those, and then when they come back, the city and the port will understand how much it's gonna cost for what they're requesting, which is an event center with up to 400 person limit, with 8-person round tables, and sliding glass doors, some sort of access to the waterfront side and on the plaza side to the north. And so what would it cost to do what the cities and the port wants to get done? And if it, the ballpark figure was $6 million is what throwing the dartboard cost. So if it comes in anywhere near there, then that's expected, and there is some understanding of how financing could be done, which is through lodging tax funding. If it's more than that, then they may have to go back to the drawing board and either change the parameters of what they're going to ask for, or start a large fundraising campaign, because the LTAC money is not going to be able to pay for much more than the $6 million. But there's also they're looking for federal appropriations, state appropriations for funding and there's often money for things like this. So putting all sorts of feelers out for money for the event center. This is the first step to, the interlocal agreement is just an agreement to, in principle, on the idea that they're going to cooperate. The two organizations are going to cooperate, and they put roughly $90,000 in funding together jointly, 50-50, to pay for this architecture rendering or plans for the initial start of it. And so after 10 weeks from probably starting a few days from now, and as soon as they can get the contract executed with the architect, that's when the 10-week period will start. and hopefully we'll have something to look at. That was the big news, and I guess the other thing which I think I already reported back was the short-term rental regulations that the Planning Commission recommended passed at the City Council, and so they go into effect on April 2nd. So they did that 2 weeks ago. They passed that 2 weeks ago, and just a couple nights ago, Monday night, they had to pass a moratorium on short-term rentals in the commercial zones to cover like a 5-day gap in between when the moratorium ended and when the rules actually went into effect. So that was discussed on Monday night. And it was probably kind of confusing because we already talked about it at quite length the previous Monday, and then City Council had to bring it back up again.
And then one other item that the Planning Commission recommended regarding the owner-occupied short-term rentals sounded like that there, for me, just as listening in the audience, that there was some pretty favorable responses to that, but at least 2 of the council members spoke about considering that as a separate item and doing that as part of the comprehensive plan.
So I think what they really were noodling was more about in the residential zones, not
Right.
necessarily the commercial zones. So
Right.
yeah, it would be totally separate from the regulations that the Planning Commission regulated or recommended in commercial marine mixed use and central business district. So it's a totally different task. We're still, as staff, trying to identify whether we are going to be tasked with doing that in the near term, or if we're going to, there were both recommendations that we start working on that fairly soon, but there was also a recommendation that we take that up as part of the 2025 comp plan process. So I think that's what won the day, and I think we'll be addressing that during the 2025 comp plan update, which definitely makes sense. Like changing a significant land use change like that makes sense to do in the comprehensive plan process. But the City Council may direct us to work on that sooner. We're still seeking clarity on that, the timing of when the Planning Commission would be reviewing potential changes for residential short-term rentals. I think the guidance that they gave was pretty clear that it would be owner occupied, so like rent out part of your house while you live there. I'm not sure how it would work if you were to do the VRBO model where you're not there and rent it out. But we'll suss out all the details when it comes to the Planning Commission.
Thank you very much. Without any other comments, I'm going to adjourn the meeting, 7:24.
Thank you.